Hello, welcome back to the studio. My name is Catherine. I'm a fine artist and teacher, and today I'm watercoloring. I'm in the studio. It's Saturday. I don't have any teaching to do today, and let's be honest, I am sleepy. It's a beautiful day outside. It's springtime. It's marvelous, and sometimes on days like today, I just want to sort of sit with my sketchbooks, do some very low pressure, low stakes kind of painting. So I'm just gonna paint in pretty much real time, and we'll just talk about some stuff. Talk about painting, talk about sketchbooks, talk about... Actually, no, I had some stuff on my mind that I wanted to talk about. I'm just cleaning up my palette here. See, my palette is really dirty. So I'm usually quite a stickler for cleanliness when it comes to my my painting in general, watercolor and oil paintings. So before I start, I'm actually just going to clean this up a little bit so I have lots of nice clean mixing space. I have a little pipette here. These are so handy. This is such a useful thing to have around in the studio for mixing mediums or for adding medium to paint, or in this case, I'm just going to use it to put a little drop of water into each of my watercolor pans so that they can start to rehydrate, and then they'll be nice and ready and active so that I can paint with them more easily as we get started here. I got some coffee. I hope you have some coffee going or some other kind of delightful beverage. And I'm just going to paint and talk. I don't have too much of a plan. I did want to talk about something. I feel like it's been coming up lately for some reason. I keep seeing this sort of comment or this kind of sentiment, I guess, on a lot of my YouTube shorts that I've been posting lately, which is the idea of trusting the process. And sometimes I post a YouTube short and someone will comment like, wow, this is a real trust the process sort of moment. And I thought it was a really interesting kind of sentiment, or it just got me thinking, I guess. Well, what do we really mean when we say things like trust the process? Like, what are we really getting at? What is that? Because I think it's very ironic usually. I don't think it's usually said in a totally earnest way. Like, of course we say things like trust the process because it seems like things are not actually going to work out, right? It seems like, pretty clear that things are going downhill. And it's almost like a joke to then say, oh, trust the process, ha ha ha. Like, because there's just no possible way things, can turn out the way you envisioned them. I asked my partner what he thought of the phrase trust the process, because it was just on my mind. I was thinking about it. And he told me a story about the Philadelphia 76ers basketball team, and that they were a pretty crummy team for a long time. No offense to any fans or anything. This is just how the story was relayed to me, but that they were kind of not a great team for a long time. But the fan base was told, "Oh, trust the process. We have a plan here. We have a plan for greatness. You just got to see it through." And it ended up not really panning out. Even after they got their draft picks and they got some pretty great players, they, things still weren't working out for various reasons. And so the phrase "trust the process," I think in sports is seen as like a very cynical kind of thing to say, very ironic, very pessimistic, as a way of saying like things aren't working out right now, and also they're not going to work out, but you just maybe have to deal with it as the fan. I think we can feel this way about a lot of things when the outcome is not totally clear to us how to get from point A to point B. And also, you might not always feel like you have control over the outcome, right? How does one achieve a goal? How does one see through a big project? How do you create that big painting? How do you master that subject or that medium, whatever it is? And a lot of those things, it might just feel like you don't have any power over it, or it's just like completely overwhelming to you. And so when someone says something like, oh, just, practice and trust the process or whatever, it can feel like I don't know, I think it can feel very flippant, or it can feel just really unhelpful. Even if there's a lot of truth in the statement, it's maybe not what you want to hear. So it can feel like a bit of a defeat, or it can feel very, maybe even humbling, I guess, to be feeling so lost and then to just be told, trust the process. Like, oh gosh, like we don't trust the process. And there's maybe, good reasons for that sometimes. And I want to say also, I think that trusting the process, quote unquote, as just like a vague idea, that by itself is possibly not a good idea, right? What kind of process are you trusting? Are you trying to just copy what somebody else is doing? Are you just trying to follow another artist's procedure or another artist's way of painting a subject that you enjoy, or you're trying to just copy their career steps or something like that? Because that probably isn't something you should trust. That's probably a process that is not worthy of your trust. It might be interesting to try things out, to experiment, or to see if things, suit you in some way. But you can't just take someone else's process, no matter what it is, and just apply it to your life and think that it's going to work out. You really do have to find your own way. So if you're trying to trust the process, but it's not really your process, then that's probably part of the problem. Nothing is, going to be the same from one artist to the next. And I think that goes for not just art things, not just for making art, the process of making art, but even the process of learning, the process of, how do you study, and how do you, adapt to new subjects, new mediums, new genres, but also like career things. Okay, what's the right sort of career path for you, if you even aspire to one, or if that's even, something that you're still figuring out is right for you or not. Just because you study art, or you're an artist, or you want to make art, that doesn't mean that you have to be a professional. And if someone else is maybe giving you the idea that that's the right thing to do, but you sort of feel like, oh, that's actually not right for me, well, trusting the process is maybe not the right way to go. It's probably not the most helpful thing for you to do. You have to find some inner authority, some way to listen to actually what is right for you, what makes sense for you, for your sensibility, for how you like to work, and for how your brain works too. Any more coffee? Something I say to students all the time is that, no matter what stage of learning you're in, you're responsible for your own education, which all I mean by that is that you have to be in charge of, am I studying the things that I really should be studying, that I really need to be studying? Am I studying those things with a lot of thought and attention? Am I going in the direction that feels true for me? Am I giving it my best effort? Or am I really being maybe half-hearted and maybe even lazy in my attempts? And even when, you're sort of quote-unquote done with school, done with that sort of very concentrated, very disciplined aspect of being in art school, are you continuing to foster growth? Are you continuing to learn? Are you continuing to study new things, try new things, grow as an artist, even though you're no longer in school? I think this painting here is probably a real trust the process moment for me right now. We'll see if I can pull this around. I'm not feeling completely optimistic at the moment, I have to admit, but it's also kind of part of the point of a sketchbook too, is like, it's a very safe place to fail. And if this particular painting doesn't really work out, it's sort of, oh well, not that big of a deal, really. I'm still enjoying painting it, so at least there's that. But I think failure is part of the thing too, right? Okay, how do you learn how to trust? Well, trust, I think, comes from having some confidence. Where does that come from? Confidence comes from like knowing yourself, from being really secure in yourself and kind of knowing like what you can take, knowing like what you can stand or what your limits are, right? And the only way to figure out what your limits are, where the failing points are, what you can withstand, is to sometimes fail. So failure, I'm back to talking about failure. If you can't trust that you can fail and survive and move on and, live to fight another day, well, then it's really hard to trust, right? You're sort of on edge. Like if every painting you make has to feel like a success, or if every drawing or sketch that you make needs to pass muster in some way, or if it needs to, give you a lot of affirmation that, yes, I really am a good artist, well, then that it kind of closes you off from actually testing your limits and seeing where the breaking point is, and then seeing what happens when you maybe go past that breaking point. When you do something that really just doesn't work out, like what happens? But the thing is, most likely you'll meet that breaking point. You'll have a really disappointing painting. You'll have a big grand idea that didn't work out, or you won't get into a show, or you'll get rejected from some program or whatever. And I mean, guess what? You'll be fine. Like, it's not fun in the moment. It's never fun in the moment. But ultimately, that's not going to break you. A bad painting is not going to. It's not going to break you. No one's going to die, right? But if you don't know that, if you don't have that experience of, meeting that breaking point and then surviving it, even if it's really uncomfortable, it's really hard to trust, right? It's like, walking across a tightrope with a safety net. You always have a safety net, right? And your safety net is like your sense of self, your confidence within yourself, your understanding of like, deep down that you're like a worthwhile person, that you're worthy and good in spite of being imperfect, as we all are. That's your safety net, and that's always there. But if you don't know that it's there, you're going to walk across that tightrope very nervous and very scared, and with a lot of fear around the idea of falling. And then, of course, if you're really, really scared of falling, you're actually more likely to fall. It's hard to make good work that way if you're just in a fear state, constantly thinking like, oh my gosh, I'm going to fall, I'm going to fall, I'm going to fall, I'm going to fall. How can you be expressive and interesting and make something unique and good if that's what's in the back of your head all the time? And maybe it doesn't go away. Maybe even if you have that sort of sense of security of that safety net below you, you still might have that little bit of like, ooh, I'm going to fall, I'm going to fall, I'm going to fall. But it's not going to dominate your work. You're going to be able to sort of move with it instead of being stifled by it or being paralyzed by it. Okay, the rose is starting to do something. It's kind of starting to take shape a little bit. I think I'm going to paint around the background a bit and sort of reaffirm the silhouette that way. I think that will bring back some clarity. And then I can go back into the middle of the rose and sort of, zhuzh that up again. Or continue to zhuzh it up. So let's mix a nice, rich, dark background color. I'm going to do a darker color on the left and a lighter color on the right, because that's what's in the photo reference, but I think that will also give some nice contrast on both sides of the form. One aspect of being an artist that is just so difficult in some ways is just how intensely personal it is, right? It's like artist is sort of an identity, right? So if you're an artist but you make bad art, well, then you are bad at your identity, basically, which, like, oof, it's kind of, it's rough, right? That's a rough place to be. But I think that is, again, it's you have to just let it go. You have to let go the idea that that everything you do at all times is going to be perfect. Just the same way you're not perfect in any other identity that you might carry with you. So, like, okay, I'm a teacher. I'm a life partner. I'm a dog parent. I'm a daughter. I'm a sister. Have I been perfect at any of those things? Certainly not. Certainly not. And so if you can sort of look at yourself, if you're a parent, or if you're a spouse, or you have family and friends that you deal with on a daily basis. Are you perfect at performing that identity on any given day? Probably not. So if you're not the perfect daughter, if you're not the perfect spouse, if you're not the perfect brother or sister or whatever, well, you can probably survive not being the perfect artist too. You'll be okay. I think I've given this advice before in another video, but maybe not. But I think one practice to try, if this idea of being imperfect and really embracing that in some ways, if that sounds scary, then try actually making a bad painting. Like, try actually doing it, maybe even on purpose. Or if it's too much to say to do it on purpose, because that makes me a little queasy too, to be honest. It's hard. It's definitely hard. I admit it's hard. If it's too difficult to say to do it on purpose, then at least do some painting and some drawing every single day for, let's say, something like 30 days, something that's fairly manageable. And if you're drawing and painting, consistently, and you sort of have a commitment to it, like, I'm doing this every day, like, that's my plan, I'm doing it every day. It's Monday, I draw. It's Tuesday, I draw. It's Wednesday, I draw. And you just have that commitment. Well, at some point, you'll probably have some really nice things that come out of that. You'll probably make some nice artwork. But you'll make some bad ones too. It's just kind of inevitable when you have enough critical mass built up that you're going to end up with some things that are just subpar compared to others. It's just the way of the world. If you do enough paintings, at some point you're going to have some that are real clunkers. But again, if you are just committed to the process, okay, you make a clunker of a drawing, or you make what I call a frisbee, a really, really bad painting that you just kind of want to, like, toss away. And if you just, stay committed to the process of just doing it every day, those little failures lose their individual meaning. They kind of just blend into the overall experience of every day we sit down, we draw. Every day I draw. Monday, I draw. Tuesday, I draw, etc. And as you work through doing that, just doing that kind of daily practice, that daily commitment, you're maybe trusting the process of just drawing every day, and that's the little bit of trust that you're putting into the system in that moment. Well, then, at some point, each of those individual drawings loses some of its significance. And that can free you up to actually experiment, to actually try something different. Maybe you start out and you're always drawing in graphite because that's familiar. But then by the time you get to day, 10, 15, 20, 25, whatever, maybe you're feeling like a little bit more adventurous. Oh, this graphite thing is getting kind of old. What if I tried some charcoal or some pastel? What if I tried doing a negative drawing process instead of always starting with line and then going to tone? What if I flipped it and started with tone instead? Just trying something different, right? And that aspect of experimenting, I think, is really important. For one thing, it indicates that there's freedom in the process again. When there's freedom in the process, that means you're building trust. That's like you're saying to yourself, hey, there's a safety net, right? I don't have to cling to the tightrope because there's something underneath that will catch me if I fall. So we don't have to be clinging so much. We can have some freedom. And that freedom allows you to experiment, and that freedom to experiment allows you to make discoveries. And being able to make discoveries means that you can, well, all of a sudden you can find a process that actually works for you. Like, I'll give you an example. In this painting, obviously I did not start with a drawing. I just kind of started with shapes, which is just generally how I like to paint anyway. And I don't know, to me in a sketchbook especially, it's like, we're just messing around here. We're not doing anything serious. So there shouldn't really be the kind of high stakes that would require me to do a super careful drawing. That's just not what I'm here for. But when I first started painting with watercolor, I definitely always started with a drawing, a pretty careful one. And I never did stuff like that. You see, I just splattered right into that wet wash right there. And already you can probably see it on camera. There's big backgrounds starting to form up there in the corner. And I never would have done that when I first started painting with watercolor because, you know, backgrounds they're kind of like, you know, bad, quote unquote, to a lot of people, to a lot of watercolorists anyway. And it's something to avoid. And it's something to avoid because it means that you are maybe not in control of the water. You're not in control of what the paint is doing on the surface. And so that's bad to get a background. But, you know, if you are kind of more or less in control, or if you just kind of feel at least just comfortable where you are, again, it's like I have a safety net. I can just do whatever, and I'm not going to die. Then maybe a background is not so bad. Maybe it's something that you can, you know, try out and notice what it does and think like, oh, that's really interesting. Maybe I'll do that on purpose next time. So I think the theme of this is all just like letting go, just sort of relaxing that death grip that you might have on trying to get a good result, or on trying not to fail, or on, you know, trying to be a good artist or whatever. Just relax that grip because it doesn't get you anywhere. I think it's not just being relaxed though. It's, again, as I said, it's just understanding how you like to work, how your brain sort of likes to work. And my brain likes to work with, you know, shapes and mass, and I like to have a lot of freedom to work in and out of those shapes and back and forth and layer on top of them and stuff like that, and sort of slowly, gradually bring things into focus. That's just how my brain likes to work. Nobody really taught me that. Nobody told me to do that. It was just something I had to figure out myself over a very, very long period of time. It was not easy, but the way that I, you know, did figure that out eventually was to just, well, number one, just paint a lot, first of all, never stop painting. And then two, to focus on my fundamentals, to, you know, really take the time to learn how to draw in the first place, which I spent a lot of time doing. Focus on fundamentals. Don't consider yourself like better than them or whatever. You're not. Give respect to the fundamentals of your craft and give them their due time, because you can't really, again, it's like a safety net, right? When you are not sure how to get out of a bind, or you're not sure if something is going to work out, let me tell you, you will have a much better understanding of how those things can work out, or how those problems can be solved if you have a good foundation in your drawing and painting foundations. So don't neglect those. So yeah, so fundamentals. So spend your time learning your fundamentals. Learn those basic things, quote unquote basic. Basic doesn't mean simple. Basic things are actually really hard. It's like if you go to culinary school. This might be apocryphal, I don't really know, but I've heard that when you go to culinary school, like in, Paris or something fancy like that, the first thing you learn how to make is an omelet, which seems very simple, omelet, not a big deal. And yet it's not that simple. I can't make an omelet. So, those basic things, they're basic not because they're easy or because they're simple and straightforward. They're basic because they're fundamental. That's the critical thing to understand the difference between something that is simple and something that is fundamental. Very different idea. At the same time, you can't just expect a teacher somewhere to just hand you the answer and give you the solution, and that's the end of your problems. I think it's the beginning of your problems, really. Learning your fundamentals and getting those on board and getting a good understanding of them. It's like part one. It's the first step, not the last step. And if you're taking classes or if you're learning online or you're jumping around to different instructors or schools or whatever, thinking that, well, one of these people is going to have the answer, you're just going to be really disappointed. Okay, it doesn't come from some external thing, although those things can really help, right? The same way learning fundamentals helps. Taking that course or taking, that semester at an atelier or, signing up for that workshop, all of those things can be really, really helpful. But you don't expect them to just have the answer. And probably we've all have had to learn this lesson like again and again, because we all sort of expect, the next thing that's going to be it. That's going to tell me what I need to know. And it might give you like a little piece of it. It might give you, a little fragment of like, something really interesting that you can take with you and move forward with and incorporate into your own process. But it's not going to give you everything because the real thing has to come from you. It has to come from you understanding who you are as an artist, how your brain likes to work, what's meaningful to you in your work, philosophically, aesthetically, etc., commercially, maybe if you're a commercial artist. All of that stuff has to come from you as an individual. No one can give it to you. But other people can help, certainly. But only if you are, taking that approach or taking that advice on board from the perspective of how does this fit into my world? How does this fit into my process? It's not a simple it's not a simple thing at all. It's not as simple as just saying, I'll just do it that way from now on. No, it's not how it works. So I think sometimes when we say, trust the process, and maybe it sounds kind of cynical, it's because maybe that work hasn't happened yet. Maybe you haven't done that work yet. Maybe you haven't focused on the fundamentals yet. Maybe you haven't figured out how you like to work yet, what really works for you, like psychologically on a deep level. Maybe you haven't figured out that you can't just onboard someone else's technique and expect it to work. And so when someone tells you to trust the process, it's kind of like, well, whatever. That's so lame, which is understandable. Maybe you haven't taken enough time to fail. Maybe you haven't failed enough. Or maybe you're trying to trust a process that isn't really yours. Maybe you're trying to just copy what someone else is doing, hoping and praying that it's going to work for you. It's another interesting thing I think about the phrase trust the process is that it's almost like a prayer or like a mantra that you say when you're pretty sure things aren't going to work out. I think if you ask artists who are, really, I don't know, at a certain point in their careers, they're kind of stable, they're sort of secure in a way with what they're doing. They kind of understand who they are more or less. It doesn't mean that you're ever done exploring, but you're not a student anymore. You kind of understand something about who you are in the world and what it is that you have to say. If you ask artists like that about, trust the process, I think they'd probably say, yeah, unironically, trust the process. But don't just trust any process, trust your process, trust your own process. Listen to that, focus on that. That's really where the answer is. I think if you're feeling like, oh gosh, I hadn't thought of it that way, that's a lot of stuff to think about. Well, I think maybe the action points, if I even have action points to give, the action points would be something like, all right, focus on fundamentals first. If you haven't done that, that's the place to start. What is it about your craft that you can just understand better? What can you go learn from? There's tons of resources to learn. Drawing and painting, you can learn with me. I'll help you. But that has to be, I think, the starting point if you haven't done that yet. Again, it just gives you freedom. It gives you more ability to walk with confidence, knowing that there's a safety net beneath you. And then besides that, besides working on fundamentals, maybe you've already done a lot of that, maybe you're at kind of a different point in your learning. What else? Well, what else would be to practice failing? How can you just set yourself up to experiment, to try new things, to draw and paint consistently, to explore new mediums, to explore new subjects, and do that really consistently, and then within that process have room to fail, have even maybe the expectation that there will be some failure, so that you just get used to that. You just learn to deal with it. You just learn to not let it get to you so much, the way that it gets to so many of us. Sometimes I think a 30-day challenge or even a 100-day challenge can be great ways to do that. When, there's like Plan April is going on right now, I suppose, and there's like Inktober and all these other kind of, month-long challenges throughout the year. Sometimes they have prompt lists even. Sign up for one of those and do it. Just try out what is it like to just do the same thing every day for a certain amount of time, to sit down and do the work, even if it's hard. And at the end of that, just see what happens. There's going to be failures along the way, but those are also opportunities for growth. So do that. If you've spent time working on your fundamentals, maybe you have some skills. The next thing I think to work on is to just, develop that ability to fail with grace, and to not let that get to you, not let that be some sort of statement on who you are as an artist or as a person. And then maybe if you've already have kind of felt like, oh, I've figured out a lot of things about failing, about, kind of getting up and dusting yourself off and moving on with life anyway after such a failure, well, then you're in a great spot to really start to figure out what is a process that works for you. What are the things that actually make your brain happy when you paint? What are the things that make sense to you, or how do you naturally sort of work intuitively and best? Start asking yourself, maybe reflect on your past failures and your past successes to suss out, okay, when I'm successful, it looks like this, and this was how I worked. And when I was not as successful, or when I had a bigger struggle, or where I didn't feel as comfortable, it looked like this, and I worked this way. And just actually do that time to reflect. I think a lot of us artists don't actually reflect that much on our past work. It can be just, I don't know, maybe too difficult, or it takes too much time, or you have to sort of stop and slow down in order to do that, and we don't always like doing that. But that's that's where the answers lie. So reflect on, the past successes and failures, and what made them such. And then use that to inform the next things that you do with your work. I want to make this shadow in here a little bit darker. I think I want to make a little bit of the background darker as well. Just carve in on this shape a little bit. Maybe I need another little leaf over here, kind of behind. Might be nice. Some other kind of abstract shape back there. Create a little bit more contrast. Yeah, I think that helps. And maybe I'll just add some splatters of water in there too. Bring back some of those backgrounds that I had earlier that kind of disappeared. So I'm just about done here, I think, and I could spend more time on this little sketch, certainly. And maybe I will, I don't know, but I'm certainly done talking. So I think I'll stop filming for right now. And hopefully I gave you some things to think about, some things to consider in your own work, in your own creative practice. I think learning to draw and paint, and drawing and painting really well, it is so difficult and it is so complicated. It's kind of by necessity. It's a mind game. It's it is mental work just as much as it is technical, craftsmanship like work. It's soul work, right? And it's very easy sometimes to get stuck in that place because it's hard to find direction when you're lost in issues that are not necessarily like technical problems. They're not necessarily problems of understanding the subject or understanding something about different visual aspects or whatever. It's something different. It's a different kind of problem. So maybe something I have to say is helpful to you. Maybe it gives you some food for thought. I hope so anyway. Leave me a comment if it did. And also, if you're thinking that you maybe need some more investment in your fundamentals, if you need some more help with some of those skill sets that maybe you're lacking, go check out some of my courses online. I have also free guides and demos that you can take a look at, and maybe you'll find some of those useful as well. Anyway, thank you for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.